So today I wanted to talk about why Western birth rates have collapsed. I look around the internet, I read, articles on this. I've become interested in this recently, even though I don't have any kids myself and I don't have any plans to in the near future. I would like to have them at some point later in my life, but for now I don't have any, I don't have any, on the horizon or anything. But, I go around the internet and I talk to people and I hear these same excuses and reasons for why people don't like to have kids or why they don't have many of them. And the number one reason, of course, is cost. People blame housing cost. They blame the cost of living. And, if you go on Reddit or if you go on, different, like Twitter or, different websites or whatever, anytime that this question is posed about like why you don't have kids or like why are birth rates plummeting and so forth in the West. I mean, those are the common things that you'll hear. And for some reason that never really rang true to me. Just because, in growing up, I come from a lower middle class, largely poor family. And we got along just fine. I had three younger half siblings. I was the oldest. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and we had four kids. And it was not easy, growing up. We had to go without, a lot of things. I mean, we didn't really go on vacations. We, of course, had hand-me-downs and everything. But that was just, like the way it was. I mean, it was just sort of like a regularly accepted thing that like if you were going to have kids, they were going to cost whatever they cost, but you just had them. It was just like it was part of life. Like anecdotally speaking, my grandmother on my mother's side, like she had 8 kids. My father had 7. My stepfather had 3 after me. And of course, my mother had 4, the 3 with him and then me. So, makes 4. And yet, my half siblings today only have, 2 of them have 2 kids. And almost none of my cousins or other people in my family had more than 1 or 2 kids. So just like on a personal basis, I've noticed this like rapid funneling of offspring over the last couple generations. But in any event, I went looking around online and I found this article, this study, as a matter of fact, on Google Scholar from 2022 that is looking at Nigerian fertility and birth rate trends. And the title of the study is Fertility and Population Explosion in Nigeria. Does income actually count? I'll link it below the video, and you can take a look at it for yourself. It's about 18 pages long. It has a bunch of graphs, and it's got some... there's a few, complex equations and statistics or whatever that it goes into. But basically, it was looking at whether, income was beginning to cause the population in Nigeria to reduce over time, or if it was having any effect, or not. And it was really having no effect. I mean, Nigeria, in case you didn't know, is having a population crisis. Most as are many other countries in Africa, for the most part. A lot of countries in the West and even countries in like China and the East and so forth are having a great deal of population shrinkage and fertility problems. I mean, I think I saw it in a YouTube video or somewhere, but I think South Korea's population crisis is the worst. I mean, it's plummeting so fast, faster than like all these other countries and everything, faster than like Japan, China, than the US and so forth. Like if you go on X and you follow Elon Musk or, you follow, any of the accounts that talk about this stuff, they're always posting graphs and charts and whatever that talk about this stuff. There's one that I found recently on the Financial Times that shows like all of these different countries like France, the EU, Germany, Finland, Italy, and Spain. The birth rates have all fallen below, like well below replacement rate, which is like 2.2 or 2.1 or something like that. 2.2 births per woman, just about. And like, these charts are all below like 1.5. So that, in other words, like most of your women are having like one child. Maybe some of them are having two. You're going to have your statistical outliers that are having like 3 and 4 or whatever. But for the most part, like people are having far less kids. And so it's below replacement rate. And those populations are getting older and they're beginning to die out. Anyway, I went through the study and I basically I found some interesting things in it that I thought highlighted the differences between Nigeria and the U.S. and the West, and pointed out some broader reasons for why you're seeing these plummeting birth rates here versus you're seeing skyrocketing birth rates over there. So first, let me just read you this paragraph that I found in this article. And it goes, children are viewed as a future investment, and given the uncertainties of them having a brighter future, a poor household can produce more children to try their odds. That is, out of the very many children, some could have a chance to become prominent individuals in the society. Apart from that, some traditional Nigerian households view greater number of children as a strength to the family in terms of providing family labor at the subsistence level. So in other words, like there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of people who live like in villages, and they live on farms, and they perform like mainly agrarian type labor in order to provide for themselves. And so in order to do that, having children, having a larger family is of a big benefit, because you're getting more laborers. And, this is not something that's unique to Nigeria or Africa. I mean, if you go back like 100 years, 150 years in American history, when most people lived on farms, you saw the same type of attitude prevalent when it came to children. Women had many children. You needed workers for the farm. You needed, 4, 5, and 6 kids, or however many kids you could have, so that you could work the farm and you could expand. So there's 2 points in that paragraph that I read that I think are important. And the first is that those children are an economic benefit because they provide labor for the family's support, which if you have a farm is a really huge benefit, because rather than having to hire people, your family will just work the farm. And if you have and if you add extended family into the mix, like, let's say you have 3 brothers or something like that, or a couple sisters in there, and they're all having 2, 3, and 4 kids. Well, I mean, just do the math. I mean, there you go. You've got like 20 people that can help your farm, that can help your house, that can assist you in all different areas of life. So there's an economic benefit behind all of that. And it probably feeds into the other reason where it said at the beginning of the paragraph that children are viewed as a future investment. There's a positive to them. That there's an expectation that children are going to contribute to the household in meaningful ways beyond just like they have a nice personality or something. But in a practical sense, they're going to actually work and enable the family to eat or have a house. They're going to be building, or they're going to be doing things, or, if they decide to grow up and, go to school or go and do something or whatever, they're going to bring credit to back to the family. and so forth. And I thought that was really interesting, this paragraph, and how it talks about children as a positive. Because, in our culture, I mean, if you talk to a lot of younger people, if you talk to people in their 20s or 30s or even older, or men who are older, about the idea of having kids, and it's like you get like a grimace and you get groans from them. You get like an attitude from them. It's like they don't view children as positives. It's like they hate them. Maybe they don't like fully hate them, but it's like the very idea of having children is just seen as a burden. It's a problem. It's a nuisance. It's an obstacle to your life, rather than seeing it the way these Nigerians see it, which as an investment. Now, obviously, they're going to be using these children as laborers to work the farm. I mean, there's a bit of an ulterior motive there, of course. So I'm not saying that Nigerians are automatically like better parents. They're having these children to put them to work and everything. But those children have a purpose, and they look at having kids and they look at reproducing with a purposeful intent. It's not just accidental. It's all about building. It's all about surviving. And that makes a big difference. There are some other cultural differences in Nigeria versus the West that I kind of highlighted in bulletin points. And the first is early marriage. Nigerians get married younger. The second is universal marriage. Everybody seems to get married in Nigeria. It's something that they aspire to and that they want to do. Number 3 is prolonged childbearing. So women are having more kids over a longer period of time. Number 4 is low contraceptive use. And then number 5 is cultural emphasis on large families due to fear of lineage extinction. And I'll read a quote from the study here that says, "Fear of extinction fostered increased reproduction in the face of perceived high child mortality, with the expectation that some of the births would survive to carry on the lineage." Now that brings me to one of my last points here, and that is the infant mortality rate in Nigeria is way higher than it is in the West and than it is in the U.S. It's like here in the West, we're able to reproduce within a relative like bubble of security. And in fact, it's never been easier or safer, medically speaking, to have kids or for a woman to get pregnant. And yet, despite that, families in the U.S. remain small. They're largely fractured. Members are often adrift from one another. You have family members, oftentimes scattered across the United States or, across different counties or maybe even in other parts of the world. I mean, families rarely like stick together in one geographic area. And that's not really so much the case in Nigeria, I guess. But there's also that fear of your family name dying out and your lineage dying, which nobody really fears that in the West. Nobody who isn't named like Trump or Musk, fears their family name dying out or their lineage dying. There's no sense of like honor or prestige that people have with their family, their name, their past. There's no sense of like an organized patriarchy or anything with many of the families. So many families are divorced, they're fractured, it's single moms. It's, that side of the family doesn't talk to the other. People are very compartmentalized, I guess, when it comes to families. I would also say that we in the West are very individualistic. We are hyper concerned with jobs, with business, with making money, with achieving these different milestones that relate to career or like personal fulfillment or ambition, whatever that may be. And you see that especially with a lot of women today. I mean, how many women do you know in the West aspire to even have kids, much less to have 2, 3, or 4 of them, or at least to have enough above the replacement rate? Like not many women aspire to be moms, and not many men aspire to be fathers. You know, most men, you know, seem to excel mainly at like watching video games and internet porn. And women, you know, would much rather like, you know, have drinks with their girlfriends on Friday night, or go on vacation, or go to work or whatever than have a family. You know, it's like the entire culture has become very anti-family in many ways. But lastly, and I'll talk about this. I mean, I would be remiss not to talk about the infant mortality rate that's in Nigeria. And, you know, the rate there, I think, is, it's like something like, let me think here. It's like Nigeria's infant mortality rate is like 72 deaths per 1,000. Whereas in the US, it's only 5.6 deaths per 1,000, which is like way, way, way lower, obviously. So just to be fair to the West, the Nigerian infant mortality rate has a lot to do with that fear of your lineage and your line dying out, and that impacts the culture as well. So just to kind of bring that around to that, you know, and we in the West, I mean, you know, infant mortality is almost a thing of the past. I mean, it happens very rarely. It's not something that probably even really factors into many people's thoughts when they're planning to have children, although it's obviously very tragic when it does. But fortunately, it doesn't happen very often in the West, whereas in Nigeria, it's much more of a common thing. So, I mean, I found this study interesting because it helps to dispel the myth that income and cost of living are the biggest factors in why few in the West want kids or want many of them. I mean, I just don't think it's really all about money. I really think it's more about the culture. It's not a financial thing. It's a cultural thing. You know, and I just don't see these trends reversing anytime soon. You know, because like we're never going to do away with sex education. You know, like in Nigeria, sex education is not very common. Contraceptive use is not very common. And we in the West, like, we're never going to tell teenagers not to use contraceptives. We're never going to tell teenagers to get married young and to have children. You know, you're never going to see public schools pushing, you know, motherhood and everything onto women. You know, you're only ever going to see them pushing, you know, independence and go to work, go to college, you know, achieve, make money, you know, build that GDP and everything. So I just don't see that trend reversing. You know, and, you know, for men, like, you're not going to really see many of them aspiring to fatherhood, I think, anytime soon either. You know, many men today are out of the workforce or have struggled in the workforce making enough money to make ends meet. And you know, fewer of them are going to college. Some are going into trades, of course, although the trades are kind of played out. But a lot of men have checked out, and they just assume sit home, play video games, and, you know, watch internet porn or go on OnlyFans or something like that, then make the effort to, you know, look for a wife or somebody who you're going to have children with. I mean, it's not even on their mind for most men. I mean, I read an article a while ago, or I saw something on X where it said like 45% of men like ages 18 to 25 haven't even asked a woman out in public. Like they haven't even tried to approach a woman publicly. You know, and I'm not talking about the pickup artist stuff. I'm talking about like you're in college and you meet, you know, a girl and you like her and like you chat her up and you ask her out. I'm talking about that. You know, I'm not talking about being some dirtbag pickup artist who's going out in the city street. I mean, like like you're making friends and then like you ask a girl out in person or something, like you get her phone number. Like 45% of men aren't even doing that. So like they're not even trying. You know, men would rather play fantasy football or look at e-thoughts than plan for a family. So those are just some interesting trends I noticed culturally between Nigeria and the U.S. that I just wanted to point out. And lastly, I'm just going to quote a meme that I found on X that I thought kind of sums up these differences pretty well. And the quote is, "We traded bedtime stories for higher GDP." Bedtime stories meaning, like we traded the idea of having kids and having families so that we could all go to work and we could all like have our stock portfolios and we could increase GDP and productivity and everything. But the downside to that is that our population is crashing. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was an interesting study, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. Thank you.